Monday, April 4th, 2022, Trinidad and Tobago is virtually reopened with most COVID-19 restrictions now being lifted. Those that are still in place include the mandatory mask wearing within the public setting, as well as the antigen test that is needed in order to re-enter Trinidad and Tobago. But for the most part, we are reopened, and business owners are breathing a sigh of relief. Of course, in 2 weeks' time, on April 19th, schools will be fully reopened across the country. But in the meantime, I'm sure there are those who are celebrating the lifting of these restrictions. Though we are still in a pandemic and we can only plead with you to practice best healthcare, it's truly up to you at this point. But good morning and welcome to Talking Point here on WESN. My name is Keaton Shaw, and remember, today is a good day to have a good day. Alongside me this morning is my co-host, colleague and good friend, Mr. Sean Michael Small. Good morning, Sean.
Well, the irony in your statement, of course, is not everybody is having a good day. But before I poo-poo on your good sentiments, I will agree with you. I do think that we do have to try to find the positives to work towards and recognize the fact that there will be things from the outside that are happening to us. And there will be things we could do about it and to try to adjust, and things that we just might not actually be able to pull off. And ultimately speaking, it's going to take a significant amount of effort again. Unfortunately, coming out of the pandemic, we're literally on the day of restrictions more or less being lifted and the country opening up, but we're not opening up to the full economic freedom and prosperity that we would have liked because of what's happening. And it's just one more thing that we have to take in stride, because ultimately speaking, there is no cavalry coming from over the horizon. There is no help. Yes, we could potentially get some assistance from international organizations, but how much do you have to give? And if it's in the form of another loan, well, I can imagine what you would say to that.
Well, I'm not too keen on having to take loans again, considering that due to our economic activity, it's going to make it incredibly difficult for us to repay. But then and again, it's not the current generation that will be repaying the loans, it's the generations to come. And that is my major concern. But let's get straight into the discussions this morning. We'll first start off with the story of the times, I suppose, and that is with rising food prices or rising products that will lead to the production of food across the globe. We're going to see an increase in yet another staple, and that is the increase of eggs, the price of eggs. That is due to the price of feed globally skyrocketing by as much as $10 TT to about $30 TT, as well as other expenses incurred by farmers. Now, that translates into the price of a dozen table eggs increasing by about $1.50 to $2. And though that may seem rather little, every little increase adds up, and that's concerning. Sean, another staple, I suppose, I guess this was inevitable. Does it really come as a surprise or a shock, or is it just the fact that the news has now become, it's now hitting the headlines as it's now part of our reality that people are feeling this bite even further?
Well, so the irony, of course, is we've had situations with conflict in the globe before, and I'm sure a lot of our older viewers have lived through some significant ones. This is the first heavy conflict that's affecting global trade on this level that we've had in some time. You could say Kuwait back in 91, that might have affected oil flow a little bit, but this is affecting not just oil and gas, because the two participants in the energy sector, but really and truly, I saw one economist, he said that for lower income countries, it's the price of food, it's the loss of the wheat from Ukraine and even potentially from Russia. But also he also warned vegetable oil, like basic staples like that, would also go up in price because Ukraine is a producer of these things. And believe it or not, as bad as we're feeling it here, there are other parts of the world where the expectations are, or the reality is significantly worse, because yes, eggs, wheat, we're gonna feel it. But there will be some places where basic wheat is so integral to their everyday, every meal a day life that, parts in sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, and I think Southeast Asia are feeling it even worse.
And that's the thing. I don't think we, at least in these times, would like to hear such a story as it doesn't necessarily reflect off of the story that is Trinidad and Tobago. But truthfully speaking, if you were to analyze the situation around the globe at various points of the globe, the situation out there is absolutely worse compared to Trinidad. That's putting it lightly. Again, I often refer to the United Kingdom, of which people say, well, the standard of living is higher and the cost of living will always be higher, and salaries are higher, but you also have to compare it in terms of salary to expenses. And right now, it is ridiculously difficult in terms of the living conditions in England. The cold weather, the prices of gas, the price of food. Brexit didn't help the situation. But
England is where the price of gas is not as badly affected from the war in Ukraine as like Germany.
And yet
or
still,
other parts of Europe.
it's
bad.
About £100 to fill up your tank. But this is what I'm saying. I know that many people may not want to hear this, and we may not really understand. But at this point, things are bad in Trinidad and Tobago. Things are not good at all. However, if we're comparing to other places around the world, we are fortunate still. We are very fortunate, and we still have things better off than a lot of other countries around the world. Anyway, moving on now. Former Agriculture, Land and Fisheries Minister Clarence Rambarat will be coming back to government. Yes, according to the Prime Minister, he doesn't want to lose the services of Clarence Rambarat, stating that the only reason why he's not in government right now is because he stood by Clarence Rambarat and his family. Clarence Rambarat intends to take up a position in an entity to be called the Single Point Land Management Authority, and this is to address problems relating to the use of state lands, state land management, and the elimination of corruption that has tended to characterize the aspects of government operations. That is according to Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, who has now put state land management under the office of the Prime Minister, indicating that he has a cabinet note that will go in order to implement the Single Point Land Management Authority. Sean, a minister who resigned, or at least it was publicly stated that he resigned, is now back in the front for a major position in a new state entity, another state entity.
The timing, as I said, was weird. And therein lies the problem with a lot of these things. It's not that there's evidence to suggest that what they're saying is not true. It's just that normally I don't think they would do or go about what they did in the manner of which they did it, and which is in the middle of the former minister making a significant point, you accept his resignation. He has reasons then. There's no press conference to explain the situation. He comes out afterwards, after the fact, to give an explanation. Now that explanation is a moot point. Then why accept his resignation in the first place? There's so much, and therein lies the problem when you're not transparent. Because if you're transparent with the process, then the process is easier to accept. But we don't know exactly what the process was. All we know was that a fuss was made about a problem. Then he resigned. Then we found out that there was a reason for his resignation. Whether or not it was the actual reason, we can't 100% attribute. And now he's back, apparently, to deal with the issue that he made a fuss about before he resigned.
Well, it is conflicting, isn't it? When the Prime Minister states that the only reason why Clarence Rambarat is not in government right now is because he stood by his side and the side of his family, and yet we're bringing him back. Now, this is nothing against appointing Clarence Rambarat, a government appointee, to a state entity. That is a totally different argument. It's just the conflicting stories in relation to exactly why he resigned, and now the story as to why he's coming back.
And it would be one thing if this was a case of, well, I'm making an office to deal with this problem in the short term. Once it's dealt with, then Mr. Rambarat will retire to his family. But what makes it especially strange is that When he gave his reasons for leaving, he said work-life balance was not good. I am going to rejoin my family. But never say never for me to come back to politics. Well, if he was to come back to politics, his work-life balance would immediately suffer all over again, especially if his family remains in Canada. Where I'm not entirely sure about what their plans are or where it is that the rest of the family will reside. So, again, the situation is very strange. How he said, or his reasons he gave for wanting to continue in politics down the road was somewhat odd and strange given the circumstances. It literally is just not the way these things are done. I don't know how else to explain it. If you are worried about work-life balance and you're giving up a political career, you don't say, but I'm going to come back to it eventually. Are you really worried about your work-life balance in the long run then? Especially when your family is going to be separated by, I don't know, the entire Atlantic?
Well, Nigel de Freitas on the 16th of March 2022 is actually appointed minister in the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. His sole responsibility was to deal with state land management here in Trinidad and Tobago. The Prime Minister stating, now I'm going to supervise that from the office of the Prime Minister. I intend to supervise the creation of the single point authority from that of the office of the Prime Minister. It's rather peculiar, though, that we're creating a one entity. I mean, why are we creating this now? Weren't there entities before that existed that dealt with this situation?
Right, so you're making an authority. Again, if it was, I need Clarence to come in, and I've asked him to hold off on retirement for a few months, a year, give me a little bit of time, deal with this situation, and then once it's dealt with, we will go back to the default, whatever authority to manage the situation that was there before, will come back into effect once we deal with the problem, and the special body will be dissolved. But that's not what's implied here. What's implied here is this is going to be a permanent change for the indefinite future. Mr. Ramrat is going to be in this post indefinitely. And it makes me wonder, what was the purpose for all of that hullabaloo before? And yes, I understand he gave an explanation. We complain when they don't give an explanation, but it's not just to give an explanation, because they have a lot of times when a politician gives an explanation, the timing of it is very weird, the reasoning and the logic is very weird, and it just does not seem satisfactory. In this case, those two things come together, and it leaves a lot of doubts in my mind, and unfortunately, and I go back to the People's Partnership only just to ensure that people don't mistake where I'm coming from. When one cabinet minister is fired, you're like, okay, the Prime Minister has a handle on what needs to be done and is willing to put aside political affiliations in order to get rid of people who are not suitable for the post. Fine. We saw that in the PP. Eventually, at some point, it turns into a bit of a minor mockery of the situation where you have to question, do you even know how to select people? In this case, we already had a similar thing on a lesser scale with a former minister being fired 3 times. We already had...
No, I think that's different, Sean.
But my point is, the track record of the hiring and firing, right? It brings up questions. And the way to avoid questions is to be as straightforward and transparent as possible. And this is not the case.
Anyway, at least the Prime Minister was straightforward in announcing that he intends to create this authority, and Clarence Ramrat will take up a position in it. What that position is, we're not entirely sure it's yet. At least this is the latest. Again, a bit of a twist in the story of Clarence Ramrat, and it goes back to the cabinet reshuffle. That entire story comes straight to the back of your head.
My only other thing is 6 years. I don't want to talk about what the administration before did. That's a separate matter that has to be judged separately. Why did it take 6 years? Almost 7. 7? No, 6. Why did it take 6 years?
6 years exactly for what?
To now bring this up.
the State Land Management Authority, Single Point Management Authority.
So now say there's a problem. So now say there's corruption. Is it because that there were investigations and it was unavoidable?
Which is why the interview that's
We're not that big of a country where the bureaucry could
the interview
easily
that
hide things.
Clammer and Stramrod had, I think it was on the Saturday or Sunday just before he resigned, which was on the Wednesday, that brought to light many things. I think it's existing conditions that were there before, but what he did in a way is that he indirectly threw the Prime Minister under the bus, stating that since I came into office, since I held this position, I notified the Prime Minister of corruption taking place. The Prime Minister then advised me what to do. I did it, and there seems to be no results. And indirectly, he threw the Prime Minister under the bus, which is, rather...
Or maybe the judiciary or criminal justice, but 6 years. That's what I say. Rumors about the firearms users license scandal existed far long before it affected the Police Service Commission's list evaluation, and I'll leave it there. Right? That existed far long before.
Anyway, let's move on now. Just another story in the, fate of Trinidad and Tobago. The Chief Personal Officer has began negotiations with public services associations and unions for wage increases. That means 90,000 employees within the public sector seek to get a wage increase, as it's understood many of them are still working on 2013 salaries. In the coming weeks, the CPO will meet with 11 unions and associations to engage in negotiations for revised terms and conditions. This began on March 28th, following instructions imparted on by the Minister of Finance, Colum Imbert. So, it's a welcoming note for the various unions. My concern is that, and I totally get that they're working on 2013 salaries. I really, I can understand how frustrating it would be, but I am concerned because publicly the unions have not stated the demands as yet. And I'd like that to come to light, although we're at a sensitive time due to negotiations taking place. But I'm concerned that we simply can't afford this.
When the head of TNTech spoke at one of the joint select committees with regards to public utilities, I believe it was, about the situation of TNTech, he brought figures. Figures allow you to see, this might be a problem. When the governments brought figures for WASA to say, listen, this is the problem with our supply and the cost of the supply from the desalinization plant. You could see from the figures, okay, this is a problem. If I don't want to believe the government's messaging, I have to disprove the figures or disprove the math behind the figures. But they give us something tangible to quantify the problem. The unions keep saying we're off of old salaries, we're off of old salaries. Fine. Okay, what are the salaries? Because all I know is that Watson Duke said about WASA at least, so only one, right? And I understand the salaries will be different for the various areas. Teachers, police officers, you have to judge them differently. I would like what the figures are. It would give us good context so that we could agree with you, or maybe we don't agree with you. But it would help your case. Because what did Watson Duke say? I won't just protect your jobs. I won't just protect your high-paying jobs. I will get you a salary increase. That was his rallying cry. One of the last things he said to the PSA before he had to pivot to his now political career. So I would just like to know what are the amounts? We never really hear what the amounts are. And I'm not even sure. We get percentages, but percentages don't actually tell us what the amount is, because now we could compare salaries and work done to other jobs.
Let's use one example for union, Tutor. One of my favorite unions, I suppose, just because of their stance throughout the pandemic and discussions. And anyway, Tutor, generally in terms of their negotiations, has used the market wage or the market rate as a standard in terms of negotiations. However, during the COVID-19 pandemic, that dropped. The market rate, that dropped over the COVID-19 pandemic and has not increased since. I'm curious to know what will be Tutor's approach, if they're going to continue using that as their standard, or if they're going to come with something else.
But then the other thing that I don't get is, and tutors in line for criticism here, because you could argue private teachers did not wait for the ministry and did not wait for instructions and did not wait to be told what to do. Now, not to say that all public teachers waited. No. Some public teachers worked real hard and had less support than the private teachers, so those teachers should be commended. But far too many public teachers were quite content in March 2020 to just sit and wait and see. And then now when the government says, okay, so we have common entrance now. What myself and some people I was speaking to couldn't understand is, why is it that the kids are so unprepared? Why are the teachers saying that the kids are not prepared, but yet other kids are somehow a bit more prepared?
Before we get caught up in that particular conversation,
no.
I'm thinking to myself that with the current state of affairs and the current rate of inflation, we may have to consider increasing salaries by as much as 20%.
Well, again, we don't know what they're asking for. We don't know what it means in terms of actual money, not just percentages, but what will it mean per individual and what will it mean in totality. We don't know if the government could afford it, because at the end of the day, it's our money too. Yes, there's going to be more money coming in from the oil and gas, but if you want to keep that fuel subsidy, it increases exponentially as the price of oil goes up. That's what it looked like. So billions of dollars would have to go out to keep that subsidy.
Anyway, folks, there's a lot to discuss, of course, this morning, but we're going to take a break now, and when we return, we'll welcome our guest this morning. He is the Communication Workers Secretary General, Clyde Elder. He'll be joining us to have a discussion on the Telecommunication Services of Trinidad and Tobago, TSTT. Last week, we had Marvin Gonzalez with us, who indicated that TSTT the government will consider if necessary, the privatization of TSTT. Clyde Elder will respond to that, but we'll also get into discussion over the Education Facilities Company Limited, the EFCL, when we return after this.
Say hello to the newest way to access eye care support. Say hello to Ferrera Optical Virtual Care. For the first time in TNT, you can now connect from the convenience of your home with our team of eye care professionals online. Need guidance on a vision problem or adapting to new eyewear? Book a virtual visit via FerreraOptical.com using our smart scheduler, and we'll take care of the rest. Ferrera Optical Virtual Care, connecting with you wherever you are.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Burning questions, urgent topics. Welcome back to One on One, the show where we tackle the most current and pertinent subjects that are affecting all citizens, where we ask the hard questions and have in-depth conversations. What separates One on One from other talk shows is that the conversation stems from a younger perspective on topics that affect the fabric of our society. One on One, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on WESN Content Capital.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andy.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Symantec, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white, and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
If you live with someone who's tested positive for COVID-19 and has to self-isolate at home, take care of them from a distance and reduce their movement around the house. Give them space, a designated space, and open those windows. If you have to be in contact, mask up, both of you. If you work, stay home from work and don't go out, not even to the grocery or pharmacy. And remember, no visitors allowed. Limit the contact to limit the spread.
The Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society. Mission-based, people-focused, community-driven.
Welcome back to Talking Point here on WES, and joining us now via Zoom is the Communication Workers Union General Secretary, Clyde Elder. Good morning, Mr. Elder. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Shah. I am in fact the Secretary General, not the General Secretary, okay?
Yes, my apologies. I realized the mistake I made there. But as you join us this morning to speak about TSTT and the Education Facilities Company Limited, let's first start off, of course, with TSTT. Last week, the Minister of Public Utilities, Marvin Gonzalez, joined us on this program where he indicated that one of the key recommendations made by a Cabinet Subcommittee on the operations of TSTT was to look at or to consider the privatization of the entity. Now, he's stating that while negotiations with the unions are taking place, or need I say consultations with the unions are taking place, the government will consider whether or not it is in the best interests of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago to privatize the entity. Did this come as a surprise to you, sir, or was this something that you had an idea of before?
Well, the government has always been talking about privatizing different companies. TSTT is no exception. So his comments didn't come as a surprise. One of the things that I'm particularly disturbed about, though, is that he has indicated what the subcommittee has been looking at. We had written to the chairman of that subcommittee, Ms. Camille Robinson-Regis, asking to be included to be part of the discussions. Up to now, no one has contacted us. Up to now, no one has asked us what is our opinion or what are our thoughts. We made a presentation to that very minister about what we feel can be done to make TSTT viable once again and to save the company. And while not indicating anything to the union or asking the union to make a comment, they have come out and said, look, listen, we are looking at XYZ privatization and what have you. I find it to be very disrespectful to the union and to the workers and to the citizens. I'm not surprised, though, given what the response was from Ms. Robinson-Regis when we wrote her. Basically, she said to us, well, look, you don't belong to the cabinet, so we don't need to include you. But we will be asking you for your comments from at some point in time, and don't go chasing shadows. Those were her exact words, actually. And I'm appalled that they can now have a position from that subcommittee, and no one has in fact sought to engage the Communication Workers Union.
Mr. Elder, could you just tell me the last time that the union was in contact with the Minister of Public Utilities? Because you mentioned Ms. Robinson-Regis there, but according to Mr. Gonzalez, they've been in constant contact with the union and in fact will continue to be in constant contact, including consultations with the unions on the future of TSTT.
So the last time, to answer your first question, the last time we were in contact with the Minister of Public Utilities was December the 6th. That was when we in fact went to his office. We had a meeting, we made a presentation. We followed up that presentation with a letter. At that meeting on December the 6th, he said, listen, I love this presentation. I want to meet with the company's executive. I want to meet with the union's executive on a one-on-one. I want to try to mend this dysfunctional relationship between the union and the company. And I want to do this before Christmas. When Christmas came and that didn't happen, We wrote him and said, look, Mr. Minister, what's going on? We got no response. We didn't understand he had COVID. And we thank God that he's okay. We wrote him in February asking him what's happening. No response. And we wrote him again last week, Friday. And up to now, he has not responded since December the 6th meeting. So he has not been in constant contact with the union, except for December the 6th. And TSTT has not been in constant contact with the union, except the first meeting we had with TSTT, which was February 1st. Since that meeting, all we have had was exchange, maybe about three letters exchanged between the parties, and that's it. So they put into the public that they are in discussion with the union, in consultation with the union, what have you. But really and truly, it is not meaningful discussion. It cannot be considered consultation, because all they are doing is basically trying to keep us at arm's length and trying to engage us in an exchange of letters and call that consultation. That is not consultation. So I've learned that politicians are oftentimes strangers to the truth. I'm yet to be proven wrong.
Well, Mr. Allah, I do have to ask, because the question of privatization, now, it isn't always the case that an entity is in an unhealthy position, so the government says, I want to try to get rid of it. Let's see if anybody will buy it off of me. Sometimes, it could be because the government itself is just not suitable to manage the entity, or to manage the entity in the environment, in the industry that it exists in. So I do have to ask, what is the union's fears about privatization? Because to me, to some extent, TSTT as an entity potentially would be better off without having to be concerned with government oversight or ownership. Now, of course, it will have private ownership. Maybe that's another kettle of fish that you might be worried about. But could you explain what the union's concerns are with regards to that?
So just before I get into that, Mr. Small, let me just say this. For all intents and purposes, TSTT is already a private company. It is 51% owned by the government. Those shares are vested in NEL, and the people of Trinidad and Tobago owns 51% of TSTT. The other 49% is vested in Cable and Wireless, which is now Liberty Global, and they have the 49%. So TSTT is not, for all intents and purposes, a public company. In fact, we in TSTT, we are not public servants. So while other unions will negotiate with the CPO when there's negotiation, we do not negotiate with CPO. We are not classified as a public entity in that regard. But it is owned 51% by the government. And let me just get to the question that you asked now. In that, what is the fear? Well, TSTT has never been a burden on the government and on the people of Trinidad and Tobago, number one. TSTT has never gotten a subvention from the government, number two. And TSTT's problem is not the ownership structure. TSTT's problem is the management structure and the management of the company. Yes, Cable and Wireless can be replaced with somebody else or something else, or even the workers and the people of Trinidad and Tobago owning the rest of it. But the issue that is TSTT has nothing to do really with whether or not it should be privatized to make more money or less money or same amount of money. That's not the issue. The issue is a management issue. And that management issue comes about simply because the board of TSTT will appoint certain persons in positions who are not fit for the job. So, for example, they've appointed Lisa Agard recently. She is the CEO of both TSTT and Amplia at the same time. Amplia is touting itself to be as a subsidiary of TSTT, but is in fact directly competing with TSTT and poaching customers from TSTT and taking customers from TSTT, because the end game is to decimate not just TSTT but the Communication Workers Union, have Amplia be the replacement, as happened with Petrotrin and with BWI and what have you. And in the process, you kill the union and you get rid of decent paying jobs. So the issue of whether or not government should own or should not own is not in question, no. I think the government of Trinidad and Tobago must own a part of telecommunications, given the critical role it plays in national security, for example. But the way they're going about decimating the company is what has the union very much concerned.
Well, Mr. Allah, so I do have to ask, government has 51%. You said that the board is appointing the wrong people in management position. So could you tell us who is in control of the board? Is it the government or is it Cable and Wireless?
Well, at this point in time, it is the government 100%. And let me just explain that a little bit. It used to be that Cable and Wireless will appoint 4 directors, TSCT will appoint 5, the government will appoint 5, and Cable and Wireless had the management contract for the company. So Cable and Wireless, even though they had 4 directors, they will in fact oversee the management of the company to ensure it was operating in Cable and Wireless' best interest, so that it was going to be, should I use the word fit for purpose, and that it will in fact generate enough profit for Cable and Wireless. When Cable and Wireless bought Liberty Global, which now is the owner of Flow, and became a direct competitor to TSTT, TAT said to Cable and Wireless, you need to get out of the boardroom. Even though you have the 49% ownership of TSTT still, I need you to get out of the boardroom. So what has since happened is that the company is now run by a board that is fully appointed by NEL, which has the vesting of the 51% that government owns. NEL is in fact owned by the government of Trinidad and Tobago. So for all intents and purposes, the government of Trinidad and Tobago appoints the board. No, that was not how it was. Since that time, the history will show, the record will show that TSCT has not posted a profit. And they have done that for different reasons. The first reason they did not post a profit since Cable and Wireless became a direct competitor to itself was because they didn't want to share any dividends and profits and what have you with a competitor. So they did different things over the last 7 years to show that TSCT was not making money, so that Cable and Wireless will not enjoy the profits of TSCT. One of the things that they did was they did an accelerated depreciation. That means if they were going to depreciate plant and equipment over 25 years, they did it over 1 year. And said, well, look, we made a loss of $500-something million in 1 year. Another year, they went and they buy Massey Communication, now called Ampere, and because they paid $40 million less than intended to pay for it, they say, the company make a $40 million profit. And after they've been doing a number of things to ensure that the company is not making money. So the issue, Mr. Shah, sorry, go ahead.
No, well, because then that begs the follow-up question, given what you said there, that technically the government is in control of the board, and the board is responsible for appointing people who seem to be not suitable to manage the company, or considerations of the board beyond just the viability of the entity and the continued growth and success of the entity known as TSCT seem to be major considerations on how they operate and control TSCT itself. We do have to ask, has the union considered saying, well, why don't we try privatization so we could remove these considerations or remove these actions or courses of behavior, or at the very least, maybe not full privatization, that is to say the 51% divested, but to have a third shareholder so that the government is not the only entity or the only source for the board to be chosen from. Because you said it yourself, if the board is controlling the mismanagement and the government controls the board, why should the government continue to exercise control over TSCT, and shouldn't it be privatized?
So the government exercising control over TSCT is in the interest of the public. The public has an ownership stake in TSCT. Let's not forget that, a 51% ownership stake. The issue, Mr. Small, is the government has a mandate, and they will deny it. I'll keep repeating it even though they deny it. They have a mandate to get rid of decent paying jobs. Look what happened with Petrotrip. Look what happened with TDC. Look what happened with Caroni Green. Look what happened with Government Human Resource Services Company Limited. Look what happened with EFCN. They have a mandate to get rid of decent paying jobs. They have now set their sights on Tiantec and Wassa. And that is because these areas are areas, when you look at it, are areas where you had strong unions, decent paying jobs, militant unions, and they had to break the back of unions. Now, with government owning the 51% of TSCT and with the policy that they have, yes, that policy is at odds with what we see as being a viable alternative to TSTT, but privatization in the way that you have been touting it is not the answer. The answer is for the government to recognize that TSCT has always been giving them hundreds of millions of dollars in dividends, plus whatever corporate tax they will get. They never had to put in 1 cent into TSCT, never, since its inception. Always took out from TSCT, never put back into TSCT, and TSCT is still giving them more than it can afford to give them up to this point in time. What we need is a company and a government that has the best interests of TSCT and the Trinidad and Tobago Republic at heart, as well as the workers. We don't have that. So whether you privatize or you don't privatize, you need to always have somebody who has the best interests of the workers and the public at heart. Privatization will not stop that. All it will do is move the profits away from the people of Trinidad and Tobago into private hands. That's all it will do.
Mr. Elder, I have two questions in relation to that. First of all, because you spoke about the management of TSTT, and you had actually some wild allegations in relation to, for example, accelerating depreciation. Now, I would assume that...
That is not a wild allegation, Mr. Small. That is, in fact, shown in their balance sheet.
Well, if that's the case, that is willful sabotage, and the union has a legal case, I would assume, against TSTT. But apart from that, what were some of the recommendations made by the union to the minister on December 6th? And you mentioned the government and the best interests of the citizens and the people of TNT. Does the union themselves have the best interests of the nation at heart, or is it just the group of workers that fall under the purview of the union, the members of the union, that they have at heart?
So those two questions, let me first deal with the issue of what were our proposals to the Minister of Public Utilities. We went to the minister, we made several proposals. I will not get into all of them, I'll give you some examples. Proposal number one. We said to the government that TSCT closed down all its retail stores in Trinidad and is no longer in control of collecting its own money from customers. That goes to a third party, and then the third party remits the money to TSCT at a cost. We said to the government, one thing you can do is to open back at least 3, it could be more than 3, but at least 3 retail stores, one north, one central, one south. So the customers of TSCT could come in once again, get clarity on their issues, get responses, get resolutions, and get value for their service. That's one proposal we made to the minister. Proposal number 2, we said to the minister, look, Tobago is a very small island. If topography allows for you to do certain things in Tobago with telecommunications, such as making it a smart island, make Tobago a smart island as a pilot project, and then you could roll out that same process and that same service to the rest of Trinidad. The minister said, I really like that idea. And once you do that, it gives you a foothold now as a company to ensure that you are in fact leading in ensuring that we do not get stuck into the old ways, but we're going to new innovations such as artificial intelligence or what have you. We also said you could even looking at how people could access medical care using the telecommunication services. We've seen it happening in America. There's Medicare, there's this one, there's Media Alert, where you have this thing on you and you press it when you are in fact in distress and somebody comes to your rescue. Do that. Another thing we said to them is cybersecurity. and I want to just pause a minute here. We said to them, TSCT, why not invest in cybersecurity and be a provider of cybersecurity? Lo and behold, TSCT itself was attacked by a ransomware cyber attack, and it had the system down for about 3 weeks because they did not look at cybersecurity, which we told them about. So I just want to pause there on that. In terms of whether or not the union is operating in the best interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, or just a small group, which is our members or the workers. Well, it is one and the same, because the workers operate in the best interest of the company, which operate or should operate in the best interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. You should be getting value for money. You should be getting a service that you're proud to call yours. You should be getting a service that says, this is ours, and you should own it. And that is what the union is trying to do, to get something that is in the best interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago and the workers in the end, of course, but they all benefit and go hand in hand with each other. You can't extricate the workers from the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago because we are citizens too. You can't extricate the citizens from the workers because the citizens depend on the workers to benefit. So it is one and the same, Mr. Shah.
Well, also, in terms of, I just want to go back and touch on that topic of privatization a bit. The union seems to be against privatization of TSTT. We've made that clear. But it's often argued that with privatization, the incentive would be the profit motive behind it. Therefore, salaries may be less, benefits may be less, but the efficiency and the sustainability of the business, which is again subjective in any business setting, may still be better off than if owned and managed by government. I mean, you yourself indicated it, Mr. Elder, that you're yet to see a government able to manage and handle the affairs of the entity efficiently and effectively. That is an argument. Yeah, that is an argument against the government owning and managing the business in itself. But if there is less wage or less benefits, is that what the union is concerned about? Because I'm thinking that if by chance it is privatized and the company is managed more effectively, efficiently, profit motive is behind it, not only will we be able to see a better company, but we might also be able to see more jobs being created for other individuals to be able to have a position. And that, again, there's a chain effect to privatization or the benefits of privatization. I mean, is there any cons to privatization?
Well, of course, there are cons to privatization. As I said before, what you will have is that the profit that you speak about will no longer be a profit that redounds to the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, but it now goes into the hands of one person, one entity, or one group of persons. And if that is not troubling to you, that is troubling to me. Because if we own 51% of a company, and a profitable company at that, then that 51% helps to ensure that everybody benefits. That 51% helps to ensure that it goes down to the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago in different ways. Additionally, TSTT, as I said before, is a quasi-private company. In that 51% owned by TSTT, 49% owned by Cable & Wireless, and it is traded on the stock market in NEL. So anybody who wants to own an additional piece of the company can buy shares in NEL. Now, when you take the 51% that government owns and put it in private hands, you no longer have that ability to ensure that that money stays with the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Suppose that private hands are a foreign entity. All that money goes outside. It wouldn't be to our benefit. And then will you say, well, look, listen, we get 2 more jobs, so that's good enough? So you've given up, let's say, $100 million to get $1 million? That doesn't make sense.
Well, while I understand that the claim that you're trying to make, Mr. Elder, with regards to the benefits of the country, however, I mean, not to harp on a situation, but when a government controls an entity, social considerations are also taken into account. The lack of a profit motive, or at least the profit motive being made secondary, could cause inefficiencies in management, which you lament about. So it is an interesting conundrum that we have there. However, I want to switch gears because we're going to run out of time. You did also want to speak about the situation with AFCL. It's something that we've covered on the program here. The situation, it's not exactly or entirely clear. The result or the outcome, however, is very clearly one that is not beneficial to the country, given the fact that there's a state entity that still has a lot of outstanding debt for services rendered, and its responsibilities have now been shifted to another entity who seems to be no better positioned to deal with those responsibilities and is accruing similar debt.
So the issue with AFCL, Mr. Small, the government formed AFCL sometime in 2005 to manage the construction and the refurbishment of schools, and to also manage the school book rental program. AFCL was not designed as a private entity to make a profit. AFCL was a special purpose company of the government. So what should have happened, or what would have happened, was that the government will in fact say to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, we want to build 10 schools, and AFCL will then charge with the responsibility to ensure that they oversee the building or the refurbishment of those schools. The government will then pay AFCL for services rendered because of that relationship. Mm-hmm. The government, however, failed to pay AFCL and continues to fail to pay AFCL for the services rendered. So what happens is that you ask me to do something, I spend my money and I do it, and when I'm looking to you for for reimbursement or for the money, you say, well, hard luck day, no money for you. So then it looks like if I am in debt or that I am no longer a company that is fit for purpose, I like to use that term these days, because the government has not been doing its part in that relationship. That is what has caused the situation EFCL. The institution EFCL cannot be blamed and must not be blamed on the workers of EFCL. They are now made the scapegoat because of government's incompetence, government's own reneging on their deals and promises and contracts to ensure that they pay EFCL, who pays the contractors. So if government doesn't pay EFCL, then EFCL can't pay the contractors. Then contractors will sue EFCL, and therefore EFCL being owned by the government will not sue itself. So they will not put the company out of business, blame the workers, and say the workers were not competent, or were not doing this, or were not doing that. Rubbish.
Well, Ms. Elder, I know that the contractors have now united in order to go after EFCL. Just before we get to that, though, could you just update us in the latest of payment of outstanding salaries owed to EFCL workers? I know that up till January, many of them were not paid. They did receive some, if I'm not mistaken, at the beginning of March. What's the latest in relation to discussions between the now defunct entity and the former workers, the former employees, in relation to their outstanding salaries and payments that are owed to them?
Yeah. So my information is that they have been paid all of the outstanding salaries, at least to date. At the end of March, I believe they will receive their March salary. They would have gotten some of their gratuity, but they still have not gotten all of the vacation that they are entitled to, nor have they been given a breakdown of what the money that they got represented. So they did get their salaries, they did get some gratuity, but they are owed vacation monies, and they are also owed some amount of gratuities that was owed in the past. But they did get their salaries.
I know that EFCL a couple of years ago settled over $2 billion in debt. Most recently, the case of Emily Elias against EFCL. In fact, just before it shut down, I think a week before they announced that it was shutting down, and went through the courts for monies owed for work done on the Parvati Girls Hindu School. He got $18 million. He was awarded $18 million in that lawsuit. The contractors have now united. They call the EFCL Unpaid Contractors and Consultants Action Committee to go after EFCL, pursue payments by all legal means necessary. Is the union a part of this action committee? Or do they play any role?
No, we don't. That is simply the contractors looking to get the money that they are owed, which they are entitled to exercise those options and those rights, because they know with the closing down of EFCL and with EFCL going into receivership, then it is very difficult. In fact, it is impossible to take legal action against a company that's in receivership. That action can be taken until the receivership and the winding up is finished. So the contractors are looking at all of their legal options, and rightfully so, to get the money that they are owed by the government.
Is there any concerns, though, that the operations of EFCL since 2018, I think we were only notified sometime last year that since 2018, the operations or the functions of EFCL now fall under MTS. And there are concerns there as well, because if I'm not mistaken, I think the Ministry of Education now owes MTS something close to $300 million for works carried out since 2018 for repairs done to schools. Is that also another concern, that we are shifting the functions, but the story remains the same?
Shifting the unhealthy scenario as well.
Exactly. All you're doing is transferring the problem from EFCL to MTS. That's all you're doing. The problem that existed at EFCL still exists. What is that problem? That problem is that government has not been honoring its debt. That is the problem. And if that continues, then you're going to have a story about MTS somewhere down the road, that MTS is not fit for purpose, not making money because government is not honoring its debt. Let me just take back to TSCT for 1 minute. TSCT is owed over $500 million by the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And the government has this habit of not honoring its debt to entities that they own or that they have part ownership in, because they feel that it's me. So who is me? I don't have to pay me. But at the end of the day, they're doing that, and the workers are the ones who are suffering.
Yeah. TNTech is also under a similar situation. But I will be I have to admit also subcontractors and contractors for the government, not just government entities, are also in that situation even now.
Well, Mr. Etler, unfortunately, that's all this time we have. It's amazing how time flies when the discussion is, well, to the extent that we had it, half an hour has gone by very quickly. But thank you very much, sir, for joining us this morning on the program. And all the very best as you continue to fight for the workers in the future. And I'm sure we'll be joined by you again in the near future to continue the discussions. But for now, sir, keep well, keep safe.
Thank you, Mr. Shah. Thank you, Mr. Small. Thanks for having me. And you all keep well and keep safe as well. I look forward to joining you all once again.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Elder.
Folks, WSN now breaks for news on the hour. When we return, we open up the phone lines this morning. Stay tuned.
Seven is out. All day is in. WESN News on the hour.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
In this season, we talk more about health, wellness, and everything in between. I am so excited to share with you everything about health and wellness so that you can design the life that you've always dreamed of. Join me here on What's Up Doc.
What's Up Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN, Content Capital.
AM Prime on WESN, the only place from 6 to 7:30 a.m. where you can get the most analytical and thorough interviews and regional reports.
The Barbados Labour Party, led by the Prime Minister Mia Amor-Motley, once again able to achieve a clean sweep in yesterday's general election.
I think a lot of people have underestimated the power of Tobago nationalism.
If the government is afraid to say it, I, Martin George, I am saying it this morning on your show, Andy. There will be no carnival before Ash Wednesday.
Grab a cup of coffee and start your day right watching AM Prime with Andy Johnson weekdays from 6 a.m. Only on your Content Capital, WESN.
Burning questions, urgent topics. Welcome back to One on One, the show where we tackle the most current and pertinent subjects that are affecting all citizens, where we ask the hard questions and have in-depth conversations. What separates One on One from other talk shows is that the conversation stems from a younger perspective on topics that affect the fabric of our society. One on One, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on WESN Content Capital.
It may seem like the hardest thing to do right now, but we all need each other to wear a mask, wash our hands, watch our physical distance, and stay at home. We need you safe. Together we can make the difference. Together we can curb the spread of COVID-19. So let's be responsible in our actions. The Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society. Mission-based, people-focused, community-driven.
Welcome back to Talking Point. Let's open up the phone lines now, and you can call in and join us on the program 623-9376, 622-9338. We do have a call on the line with us from Pitty Valley. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, caller.
Good morning, Sean and Keaton.
Good morning.
On the Chevy conversation a little bit this morning, you all didn't touch on it. I want to speak about Mr. Winston James this morning and his brother hiring him. I was waiting patiently for Mr. James to what his explanation will be, and I was waiting patiently when TV6 interviewed him and asked him if he saw any nepotism in the hiring. I was totally disappointed in Mr. James, who I love hearing his political commentary. Mr. Winston James said the PNM did worse, and Mr. Manning hire his wife. For a man so intelligent, I've lost all respect for Mr. James.
Yeah.
So the PDP just won a landslide because of all those things, hiring and family and all this stuff. And for Mr. Winston James to come, I was wanting to come with some sort of good answer. I was waiting, and he went down the road of the PNM did worse and Mr. Manning hired his wife. When Mr. Manning hired his wife, Sean and Keaton, I don't know if you can remember, it was an uproar for months in this country. Months. So to Mr. James this morning, I am disappointed you and I lost all respect for you. Have a nice day.
Have a nice day, caller. Thank you very much. The issue of nepotism, it's unfortunate the response on the part of Mr. James, because I am, for one, I'm totally and utterly fed up at this constant, well, they did this and they did that, so we can do it as well. I mean, we keep fighting against it, and yet when we get into position, we are with it, we are for it, we agree with it, we do the same thing. There's no excuse for nepotism.
Or rather, when the other side does it, it's so bad, but when we do it, well, you have to understand, it's not that simple. There's a lot of intricate complexities to this, and this was the best we could do at the time. It's like, is it really? Now, granted, I have no problem giving some deference and having patience with you, but then allow me to afford the other side the same amount of deference and patience as well. You know, the rules have to be the rules. Whatever the rules are, they have to be the same for everybody. That's only fair. How we judge the situation has to be the same.
Anyway, folks, 623-9376, 622-9338, call in and join us on the program this morning. I just want to go back very briefly to the conversation that we just had with Mr. Elder. And my immediate thought and my immediate reaction, very interesting, but to me, you know, it seems as though Mr. Elder was making an argument against nationalism more than anything else. That's what it comes across. I know that's not his intention, but the argument itself seems as though it was against nationalism.
And the irony is, when you look at the track most of the unions take, you do have to wonder, why do you want the entity to remain a public entity in the case of not necessarily in the case of TSCT. TSCT is public ownership. It's slightly different than, say, the port of Port of Spain or WASA or TNTech, right? Why do you want it to remain when you constantly complain about the government? You think about it. That's more or less what the union does, right? The government is trying to destroy jobs. The government is trying to treat us unfairly. Union busting. So, now granted, privatization ain't that simple. It's not as though, you know, you're automatically going to get a better situation than what you have now. But none of the unions seems to be even hinting at thinking about a different ownership structure or a different setup. It's basically the government are doing a job, but we want to stay under the government.
We have another caller on the line with us from Chaguanas. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning, Professor.
The problem with TSTT is the service itself stinks. Most of the time you're getting missed calls, you're not getting through to people. I explained this to you when they improved my system here. I lost my extension from downstairs, so I have to be running upstairs all the time. I don't see how that is an improvement. Right? Then we have the question of the former Minister of Agriculture. Now, you were supposed to check out his position at Caroni Limited when he allowed endless people to squat on the Caroni Limited lands. At that time, the law was that residential people who was there before, I think it was 1995, will be regularized, and agricultural people 5 years before that. Right? And he allowed all these people to squat there. And in the end, we end up getting the worst commissioner of police, in my opinion, because that was used against the main contender for the commissioner of police post, Mr. Dulal Chan, that he went and applied for a piece of state land. Now, he did it the proper way through the commissioner of state land. And because of these people who were squatting, he did not get the commissioner of police post. Any questions, gentlemen? I assume you didn't get time to check out.
No, haven't checked it out. You have any questions for Professor?
You don't know it get important now because you put him to do all this squatting. They said 22,500 people applied to be regularized. Only 8,500 was on state lands. But now you hear the government and them talking about 250,000 people to regularize.
Yeah.
That is the problem. How you could put a man like that to be in charge of state land?
Well, Professor, I do have to agree with that statement because I don't really know what Mr. Ramrat has done that will have so much trust and faith in him. And certainly as a public speaker or as a politician, as a leader, he has not had any moments that inspire confidence in his abilities to get any sort of headway done in a problem of that magnitude.
All right, thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
I think also in relation to that, we have to bear in mind, I keep going back to this, and I think we keep forgetting the fact that Mr. Ramrat informed the Prime Minister. He said he informed the Prime Minister.
He said he informed.
Which the Prime Minister acknowledged. I don't know why it only came to light 6 years later, as you mentioned, but we also have to question, the Prime Minister has now stated that the management of state lands will fall under his office. But if you didn't act upon it 6 years ago, again, that in itself doesn't inspire confidence as to what your intentions are.
And the thing is, this seems to be a large problem that was allowed to fester and allowed to fester and allowed to fester. And again, prevention is a lot cheaper than the cure. Now they have to cure it. How it will be cured and how it will be implemented will be a whole other question in and of itself. But isn't it going to, something of this magnitude, isn't it going to be a cabinet decision anyway?
No, it's a cabinet note. It's going to go...
Right, so while, yes, you're going to need somebody to take point on it, did it have to be an outgoing senator to take point on it?
It didn't have to.
So, again, is this a political decision?
Well, clearly it is.
With regards to the internal politics, and this could be where now, earlier question you had a week or two ago, where the internal politics of the party is potentially coming to play in a way that is not so beneficial to the country. Because there are other people in government bench, junior ministers, you're already removing it from the original ministerial portfolio anyway, right? You could move around a minister in the ministry of whichever one, it doesn't matter. They are not all there with a serious hard and fast papers. I'm sure they could afford to be transferred for a few months, a year to 2 years, or whatever have you, to take point on this.
But does the role or does the position of Nigel de Freitas now become obsolete?
Well, right, because you have 3 ministers in that ministry, one for land specifically. What's the point now?
Or is he going to now move? Is he now his position as a senator? He was just appointed?
He was just appointed.
On the 16th
so
of March,
you technically just appoint someone who could take point on the matter to bypass him for someone who wanted to retire so that he would have more time to spend for his family.
That's what he said. Again, I'm not going to put any theories out there, but I certainly have an opinion that something else happened.
Now,
and you went back to comments we made, I think about 2 weeks ago in terms of the internal politics.
Yeah.
It does affect national politics. Internal politics within the party will affect the national narrative.
Some of it is unavoidable, right? Because politics is politics. So the internal politics of both the government and the opposition is going to spill over. It's unavoidable. However, in this case, I do have to ask, is it that the Prime Minister needs somebody who either A, he could trust, what does that imply, or B, he could exercise more control over, what does that imply, right? Why Mr. Rambarat specifically, when he resigned, and he gave reasons for his resignations, which, to be fair, I don't necessarily believe, but that's a whole other
There are two sides to this
matter.
show. I'm creating a new entity, and therefore I want someone with the necessary experience.
Does he have necessary experience?
If you want to refer to him as an expert, so be it. According to Professor, he was under the Carney Land Management.
Right,
That's one.
but
and two, he's a former minister. So,
what did he manage that properly?
So, as I said, this is the thinking. You know, whether or not he did it properly, it's still on his CV, right? You know, I'm interviewing you for a job. Whether or not you did it properly, it's still on your CV.
Yes.
And plus, who's going to write a letter of recommendation for him?
That would be poor management if all you do is just look at the line items and not ask for details.
But who's going to write the letter of recommendation for Clarence Rambarat for his new position? Again, that's not necessary because he is a political appointee. So that is one aspect. The other thing is we're now starting a new entity. We're going with a fresh perspective, a fresh mind, fresh hope. We want to get rid of all this corruption. We want to deal properly. We want to deal with this situation in relation to land management, state land management. Do we bring in somebody new, somebody fresh? You know, again, bear in mind that we're bringing them in, so it is going to be a political appointee.
One of the ironies that we do have to realize, however, is while we want to see the corruption end, we need to understand that ending some, if not a significant majority of the corruption is not as popular as we would like to think. Idealistically, if you say corruption, people say, yes, it should end. But then if you say corruption should end, so no more freeness with regards to state land, or no more ability to get a favor, to get a house from housing, Ministry of Housing, etc., etc. If you want your driver's license, you can't just pass whatever is implied. All of these little things are also corruption. And does the country want to remove? Because you could say that Petrotrin was a prime example of it being overstaffed, overinflated salaries. It's not necessarily the only place that might be potentially mismanaged. It was cleaned up. People didn't necessarily like what it took to clean it up. Cleaning up big problems are not going to be nice and easy and simple. They're going to be messy fixes that's going to have their stakeholders that's going to complain and it's going to try to make it out like, hey, this is the worst thing for the country ever. So I would like to know exactly how is it that I don't have a lot of faith that Mr. Rambarat is, even if he was the man for the job, that he's positioned to really tackle the problem.
We do have a caller on the line now with us from Tobago. Good morning, caller. Hello, good morning.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, John.
Good morning.
I'm listening to your program, excellent program. I just heard Sean made a point that is one of my pet peeves, and I wanted to call in and give him a thumbs up on that one. You know, high five. Corruption begins at the grassroots level. A lot of people don't realize that. They think of corruption only as what the government, what the big boys up there do with their money. But it begins at the grassroots level, because those people in government were once people just moving around the community. You know, going to the grocery line and seeing someone in line that you know that is way up front and you don't want to be in the back, so you go and you give them your groceries with your money to check out for you. You know, not realizing that is now two people in front of everybody else, because you're giving them your money. It's not like they're paying for it with their money. but you're actually giving them your money. That's two transactions that cashier has to do. Just bypass that. The way you just drive on the streets and two cars, one going east, one going west, will just stop and just start chatting and talking and have slews of cars behind them, not paying attention. This is corruption. So I agree with Sean. It begins at the grassroots level, and we in society have to be cognizant of how we treat each other in a corrupted way. Thank you.
Thank you, caller.
Thank you very much, caller, for your contribution. 623-937-662-2938. I did hear a beep, if you didn't get through on that.
Call again
on the
quick.
other line.
But yeah, we have a caller from Diego Martin.
Caller joins us this morning. Good morning, caller.
Hi guys, thanks. Good morning.
Good morning.
Sean, can I just reinforce that point on private schools and the lockdown, please?
Okay, yes.
Because that COVID case 0 was the relative of a child at a private school. And within 1 hour of confirmation, teachers, parents, everyone was notified by their principal, who immediately started formulating a plan. She had no prior experience, but what she had was courage, initiative, and integrity. Things that are lacking. She went online, discovered Schoology. There was a new timetable of half-an-hour classes. Little changes were made. I mean, visual arts teachers didn't even know how they would teach online music, art, and PE. But they did. You know why? Because diligence, persistence, execution under incredible leadership. It's been challenging. These kids, they've just been phenomenal to watch them every day. They've excelled. It's been challenging, but they've done well. And it's just been incredible to witness that every day for the last 2 years. I would like to say congratulations to them. And you know what? Nobody asked for an increase. They all used their devices and everything, and they made the sacrifices. On Clarence Rambarat, I don't know, did he attend graduation or something? He should have just asked for time off. Now we have another body. Is this a new body being created?
It's a new body being created, yeah.
Right. Okay, cool. More corruption. I do believe Karen had mentioned that too, didn't she? Say that she thinks he might have resigned and then come back later. So I think she was right. And Putin has resorted to genocide, Chechnya all over again. I mean, my stomach is just turning. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will suspect that even Karen will be surprised at the speed of this turnaround.
I don't think Karen meant it in this manner.
In this exact manner.
I don't think she meant it in this. She didn't mention it, but I don't think she meant it in this manner. Again, it's put the pieces of this puzzle together, and somebody makes sense of it.
What the caller made is a very good point, and I'm not saying that, it's 100%. This is what it is. That it's a new entity just so that they could have corruption. What I am saying, though, is that when you make a new entity on the fly, depending on the situation, you have to do whatever you can do to avoid the perception that there might be corruption.
But interesting enough, where are we going to get the funds to not only staff and resource and outfit this new entity, but to ensure that it continues to operate efficiently?
And this is where we have to be fair, and we have to be patient, because at the end of the day, we know that the government has an issue with money. Now, when we give them that excuse, that question that you just raised, you want to make a new entity, where's the money coming from? You can't pay off AFCL. That is a valid question.
This is not a new division that's falling under a pre-existing ministry. It's not even a creation of a new ministry. This is a creation of a new state entity. And by all means, it's special purpose, it seems. So again, I don't know what's the thinking behind it, but I would assume that this is not just we're taking action after 6 years of Clarence Rambarat now coming and throwing you under the bus. Clarence Rambarat clearly came out and called you, and interestingly enough, after he called you out, and after he admitted this was taking place, and he was witnessed over 50 cases, Wednesday he hands in his resignation stating family matters. He's missed his family, he hasn't been able to spend time with them. And then all of a sudden, 2-3 weeks later, he's in it again. It just doesn't make sense. Now, according to Clarence Rambarat, At least this is just based off of, I didn't see the full interview or hear the full commentary. But he's arguing that this particular position, you could do it from anywhere. I don't think that makes sense. This is, to me, it sounds like you need to be on the ground.
How, so you're going to be in charge of a new important body. It has to be created, by the way. You know, this is not, you're not taking charge of something. It has to be created from the ground up. And by the way, the responsibility that it has, it's not like it's just a management or administrative function. You all have to get to the root of a major issue. You're going to do this via online. I'm very confused as to how that is supposed to work, to be honest. On a practical level, yes, I get it. We just ask our kids to be educated online. But this is different. I would like to think there's a reason why, even after proving that working from home is an effective tool, not all companies are going to do it.
Anyway, folks, unfortunately, that's all the time we have this morning. Thank you very much to Mr. Clyde Elder for joining us for the conversation, and thank you very much to all our callers for their contribution. Interesting discussion in relation to, well, it starts off with nepotism, but corruption all around. And I do like the points raised by both Sean and the caller from Tobago that corruption starts at the grassroots. I mean, why do we complain when we don't help a situation? Put it that way. If we practice the same, and if we do the same, and we say, well, they do it, we could get away with it, really. That's ignorance. That's absolute ignorance. But anyway, let's just mention once more before we leave that, again, things fully reopened today for them.
Apparently not just here, Sweden and Switzerland well, they've made either declarations or they've abolished some of their regulations as well. So it's more or less the timing of the globe. Unfortunately, it's overshadowed by the new crisis. I do have to worry if this is going to be a trend.
Unfortunately, it's just leading to another thing: rising fuel prices, rising food prices, and of course...
The irony is, before COVID, TNT's greatest problem was the fact that oil, I believe, was reaching $20 a barrel.
Sean, over the pandemic.
You
remember
before the pandemic, oil was too cheap?
Yes, but at the beginning of the pandemic...
Now it's too expensive.
At the beginning of the pandemic, do you recall when we were trading oil at in negative figures?
Well, yes. It was in negative figures for...
We were trading oil... Anyway, up to now, I am still not sure how that works. I mean, were we just giving away oil?
No.
But anyway, folks, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much for joining us on Talking Point this morning. I'm Keaton Shaw, and just remember, in your daily endeavors, we're still in a pandemic, so I'm kindly asking you, the restrictions have been lifted, to please practice best healthcare. Wash your hands. Continue to watch your distance, although I'm not entirely sure how much sense that's going to make, considering that now we can party and fed absolutely free. And remember, you still have to wear a mask. I think people forgot that the Prime Minister said that. They just heard restrictions were lifted, so I don't have to wear my mask anymore. No, you still have to wear your mask. So please bear that in mind. Sean Michael Small.
I'm just going to say, use what's going on in Ukraine as an example of how communication works. And ask yourself, why do people believe what they believe? And now take that with regards to our country, and when politically, our political class is lazy with their communication, why is it now? You have so many examples on how our own country responds to external news and external information. Why is it that it seems as though we are taken by surprise by how the country reacts to what it is that's said publicly? We need to do better on communication, people. And we need to demand our government and our opposition does better on communication.
Anyway, with all that said, remember my new favorite line. Today is a good day to have a good day. It's my new favorite line. Anyway, folks, have a good day. Bye-bye.